Spamcan seemed to return to Sodor far too often for his own liking, or anyone else's. On a late winter afternoon, he delivered a goods train from the other railway. He went to rest at the sheds. A chorus of groans sounded upon his arrival.
"I am thoroughly bewildered," he moaned dramatically, "as to why I'm forced onto your metals time and again. It's practically magnetism. I suppose it must be nice for your railway to be graced by modernity. I'd say you're lucky I'm here."
"We'd be lucky if you weren't," sneered Gordon. "We get on just fine without you around."
"Well, that's up for debate,"
glared Spamcan.
"Never mind that I can do double your work in a fraction of the time. But I've brought precious sand to get you through this cold spell. Not that I care for the stuff. We diesels never lose our grip on the rails, or whatever keeps you kettles boiling."
"You've brought the sand, have you?" Sir Topham Hatt stood close by.
"Why, yes, sir,"
replied Spamcan with false sincerity.
"Anything to keep your fine railway running."
"And where, pray tell, is it?"
"Come again, sir?"
"The sand, 199. As you're so certain of its whereabouts, perhaps you could explain why it's not with the rest of your train." "I'll tell you," interrupted Sir Topham Hatt. "It seems you kicked up such a fuss about having to come to my fine railway that you left before the last trucks could be coupled to your train. What do you suppose they contained?"
"Oh dear,"
blushed Spamcan. "I would suggest you make yourself comfortable," continued Sir Topham Hatt. "Due to bridge work, you won't be going home tonight. You can help with the goods traffic tomorrow. At least then you can be somewhat useful. Good day to you." The engines chuckled in delight, except Edward. "I'm worried," he sighed. "Driver says a hard frost is coming tonight, and my sandboxes are rather low." "Humph!" pouted Spamcan.
"Modern engines aren't concerned with such trivial matters. Sand indeed. Is this a railway or a playground? Just stand aside and let me handle things, old-timer."
The other engines hissed, but Edward stayed silent. The next day, Edward collected his passengers. His driver was right. Frost coated the rails, and he'd witnessed the other engines wheel-slipping all morning. Right, Edward thought as the guard's whistle blew. Nice and steady. We'll be all right. Edward puffed steadily along, dropping sand if he felt he had no grip. Thankfully, the morning sun helped melt the frost. That's good, he smiled. But the sun was no use in the tunnel. It was dark and frigid, and the frost clung hard to the rails. As Edward steamed through, his wheels slipped, and the coaches dragged him to a snail's pace. Come on, he groaned. He tried to drop more sand, but his sandboxes were depleted. Go on, Edward, called the driver. You're nearly there. Then there was trouble. Edward was puffing so hard, his smoke began to fill the tunnel. The driver and fireman covered their noses with their jackets. Nearly there, huffed Edward. With one final effort, he burst into the daylight, and his wheels found their grip once more. Brilliant, old boy, well done, cheered his crew. From the opposite direction, Spamcan came trudging along with his goods.
Looking a little worse for wear, eh, old iron?
He chortled with delight. Oh dear, Edward thought. He won't like my smoke in the tunnel. He didn't.
What's going on?
He coughed, shutting his eyes.
Oh, help! Oh, fire! Fire! Oh, I'm too reliable to go up in flames.
He was too startled to notice the frosty rails, and the heavy train had dragged him to a complete standstill. The guard ran back to the last station. Edward was resting when the guard arrived and asked for help. "I'm sorry, sir," sighed Edward, "but I've got no sand left. A train like that would be too much for me without it." "That wretched diesel is nothing but bad luck," hissed Gordon. "Is this a railway or a playground? He's certainly treating it like the latter." "That's it!" cried Edward. "Gordon, you're brilliant!" He turned to his driver. "There's a school near the station, and their playground has plenty of sand. I'm sure we could borrow some given the situation." The driver, fireman, and guard wasted no time. They trudged over to the school, filled buckets with sand, and when they'd returned, Edward's sandboxes were full once more. "Off we go," he whistled determinedly. By now, the smoke had cleared from the tunnel. Spamcan hadn't noticed. His eyes were shut tight, and he continued to shudder and whinge as his wheels spun.
All these years of service, only for it to end on this rotten island. It's curtains for me. Tell my fitter I
Made it out of the tunnel in the end? Spamcan cracked open one eye. There was Edward, buffering up in front. Spamcan eyed the smoke wafting from his funnel and realized at once what happened.
Oh my. Perhaps I got a bit caught up in all the excitement.
Well, let's get you moving so the others can get caught up. You've delayed them with all this running on the spot. Slowly and carefully, Edward pulled Spamcan and the train free of the tunnel. The sand did the trick, and he had no trouble with the icy rails. When they reached the station, Edward chuckled. Not too shabby for an old iron, wouldn't you say? Spamcan didn't say. He left later that day, much to the delight of the others. It was strange then when he returned the following morning with only a few trucks.
Finally brought that sand you steamers were clamoring for,
he muttered, trying not to make eye contact. Edward noticed one of the trucks was still coupled as Spamcan moved off. I say, keeping some for yourself?
Your fat controller says I'm to take it to the schoolyard as repayment. Such work is beneath me, he growled.
I'm sure the children will be pleased, Edward smiled. And you can use some of it yourself if you slip again. I'm sure you wouldn't mind that beneath you, eh? Spamcan's only reply was a disgruntled honk.